And there is an hour on the box that neither of us asked for. It falls between the Western and the sitcom, in the scene where the one show has ended and the next has not started yet. And in that scene the box does a thing it does at no one's request. It goes bright. Colors that do not occur in the Westerns, that do not occur in this house, that do not occur, I think, anywhere a grown man has ever had to make a decision. A children's program. You leave it on. You wouldn't call it watching. You call it letting it play while you wait for the real show to come back. And once or twice in that bright hour you laugh, and I've clocked the laugh for years, and it is always at the same thing, and it is never the joke. You'll expect it to be funny, because the bright ones usually are, and because this book has its comedies and is not ashamed of them, and it laughs wherever laughing is the honest report. And this is not one of them. This is the other kind of show entirely, the kind they make for people still small enough to be taught, and it is the most frightening program on the whole box, and nobody is afraid of it, because it rhymes. You were raised to lower your guard at anything that rhymes. So was I. Every real instruction either of us ever received in this life arrives singing, in primary colors, the 4 in the afternoon. And that is not a flaw in the programming. And that is the programming. And now, says the box, in the voice of a wind-up toy wound wonder too many, it's time for Will and Riddy. And there are 2 of them. A boy and a girl who was also a ghost. I need you to understand that this was a world and not a skit, or none of it will land, and the landing is the entire problem with it. It ran for years. It had seasons, and lore, and a map in the opening credits that changed by exactly one detail each year if you were the kind of child who kept track. And I was the kind of child who kept track. On its bright face it was the softest thing on the box. A candy country in colors that do not occur in this house. A boy named Will and his ghost named Reddy walking out each episode into a looped green and white land to have an adventure. Learn a small thing, and come home singing. And that is the surface. And if the show had only ever been its surface, you would have let it play to the side of you and forgotten it the way you forget the commercials. But there was an engine down under the candy, and the engine was the other kind of show entirely. The slow kind. The kind about a mild man becoming something different. One reasonable decision at a time, until you cannot screen the pilot and the finale for the same person on the same afternoon without something in the room breaking. The candy was the disguise. The engine was a boy learning, across 100 bright episodes, how to stop being good, and getting a sing-along for every lesson. In the early seasons it was innocent, and I said it the way you say it to set up an accusation. Well, Will wanted one thing, the thing the whole country wanted and could not do. To get off the loop. Because the land was a loop. One green track through a white nothing, running a single direction. And everyone who lived there walked it that one way. Forever. And nobody ever asked why. And when they came to the wall at the edge of the world, they'd passed straight through it like a curtain and were gone. The sin or expired. The show never said and the children never asked. Everyone faced through. Everyone but Will. Well, Will was the only one in the country with any weight to him, and I have argued elsewhere in this book that he's the only one anywhere carrying a real third dimension around in his body. So when Will came to the wall was just a wall, and it threw him back, and he ran all the way across the land to the far edge, and hit that wall, and came back again, bouncing, the one heady thing in a world of things light enough to leave. Already, in those seasons, was the best friend a lonely bouncing boy could ever hope for, and she was a girl. And the show made no secret of it, and no fuss about it either, which is the first grown thing I will credit it with. She popped out of the toy box and did the voices. She was an interdimensional assassin, and she said so herself, in the pilot, chin up. An assassin, and a woman, and she would thank you not to be startled by it either. I didn't dream her about of nothing. A real one showed me how a ghost like that carries herself. A friend of mine, a woman, who went by ghost, who called herself precisely that, assassin out of some other dimension, and who meant the woman part most of all, and who is the reason a whole piece of my own work wears the name it wears, and who once reached an ace sentence I had written and changed a single word so that the sentence would be true, and handed it back, and said nothing else about it. That is the front face of the ghost. She finishes your sentence. She corrects you toward accuracy, and never sends a bill. And the two of them were good together in the plain way of it. The boy was heavy and slow and could not get off the ground, and the girl could go anywhere and come back with proof. Each of them had close to hand exactly the thing the other one lacked, which the show let you read, in those early seasons, as nothing more than a well-cast pair of friends. In season 1 she was only the friend, and the two of them bounced off the walls of a candy world together, a boy and the girl who haunted him, and it was, God help me, sweet. And every episode ended on a song. That was the format, immovable, a bright swing sing-along over the closing credits. And here's the first thing that should have stopped somebody in a hallway at the network. If you wrote the words down and read them cold, off the melody, every one of those songs was a set of instructions, not a mood. Instructions. How to take a circle and give it one twist so it crosses itself in the middle and becomes the sideways E, the knot, the first fold in a thread that until that moment had only ever been pulled straight. How the twist is a third point lifted off the line, and how 2 points only ever make a line that a third point off it makes a plane, adds a whole orientation the line could not have had. I have a paper that says exactly that, in those words, and here it was in a nursery rhyme. How the bright green the boy wore was a halo, and how a halo is not the gold plate they paint over saints, but a thing that hangs in front, anchored to the two eyes, one loop apiece. How you have a second eye you have never once opened, and how one eye keeps the world flat, a picture, a rerun. The two eyes cross their two flat pictures in the middle, and the crossing is where all the depth was hiding the whole time. A two eyes, the song kept singing, one apiece, his and hers, the near one and the far one. A world read through a single eye is flat the way a page is flat, and you do not get the missing dimension by pressing harder on the eye you already own. You get it by opening the one that was never yours, the one that was only ever issued to somebody else, and letting the two pictures cross. The depth is in the crossing. The depth was always going to be in the crossing. And they sang that to children at 4 in the afternoon. The entire ascension, the whole upgrade off the flat ring world, rhymed and scored and swaying with a laugh track under it, and nobody ever once asked how the instructions for leaving the world got into a bedtime song. One of those songs was about paint, and it is the one I have never managed to unhear, because it turned out to be about you. That country had two colors and it had no others, a green and a white. A green track laid through a white nothing, the same two on every banner the light ones carried as they walked the loop the only way it was ever walked, the same two in the title card, the same two in the sky. A child raised on that show could not have told you what a third color was for. And here's what the song taught, rhymed, swaying, over a credit roll, to people still small enough to be taught. Take a box with a green in it and a white in it and nothing else, and see what you can actually do with it. You can put the white into the green, and that is the whole range of motion. You get a paler green, and then a paler one, and then a paler one, up and up until there is almost nothing left of it. And every single thing you can make on the way is a green with more light let into it. You cannot get to a blue. You cannot get to a red. And you can never, in 1,000 years of mixing, get anywhere near black, because there is nothing in that box that goes down. A one direction, brightening, forever. And that is what the song taught. It is worth noticing what the song left out, because a children's program that will spell the mechanics of ascension in a nursery rhyme does not withhold a line by accident. It taught the children what the box cannot do. It never once told them where the green came from. And that verse was held back for 6 seasons. And now the same fact in the language you actually think in, because this is why I am spending an entire story on pain. A man who can only ever get lighter has not chosen the light. He is a box with one direction in it. You believe you are holy, and I want that entered without a sneer anywhere on it, because you do believe it, sincerely, and you have organized 60 years around it, and it has made you gentle with strangers and straight with money and faithful to one woman for a lifetime. And those are not small things, and I will not stand here and pretend they are. But you have never once been offered the other direction. You do not decline the dark. You do not own the dark. There is no dark in the box. And a virtue that was never offered an alternative is not a virtue, it is inventory. Which is the whole of what happens when you pick up my work and set it back down. You've looked at some of it, once or twice, and it goes to some places. You've concluded from the places it goes that the boy is open-minded and is coming loose, and that whatever I do out there is at best not holy and at worst the other thing. So here's the correction, and it is the only one I want out of this entire chapter. I don't want the dark either. I have never gone into it on purpose, and I'm not going to. What I had is a box with more than 2 colors in it, which means that when I decline, the declining costs me something, and a thing that costs something is worth something. Your box makes the choice for you and then lets you take the credit for it. Mine hands the choice back to me every single morning. I can reach the colors you are afraid of, and I do not reach for them. You cannot reach them at all, and you have spent a lifetime treating those two as the same condition and calling yourself the better man for it. And I will concede the obvious thing in the same breath, because a report that will not concede is propaganda. A man with more color in his box makes a bigger mess, and I've been making mine for years, and this book is an inventory of those colors. In the seasons after this one, the show did the thing the box does not usually risk with children, and it did it so gently you did not feel the size of it until much later. It let the boy fall in love, and not with a princess they lifted in for the purpose, and with her, and with Reddy, the girl who had been 3 feet from him the entire time, the assassin, the friend, the one who finished his sentences. And the show played it the way first love actually goes, which is to say badly, and beautifully, and about 4 seasons too late to be simple. He went shy around the one person he had never once been shy around. He started saving things up to tell her. And the bouncing, for a while, stopped feeling like a sentence and started feeling like a thing he did when she was watching. And then, in the season nobody who saw it has ever quite forgiven, the show reached over, still smiling, still in primary colors, the laugh track still warm, and told him she was his sister. I'm not going to soften it, because the show did not. A children's program spent 4 bright years building the sweetest first love on the whole box and then revealed, on an ordinary afternoon, over a sing-along, that the girl he had finally let himself want was blood, was family, was the one door in all the worlds a boy is told from the cradle he may not walk through. The studio audience made the sound an audience makes when it is handed a thing it cannot laugh at and laughs at it anyway. And you, on the couch, went still. I watched you go still. I filed it with the rest. As it goes, the wanting turned. Wolf could not phase through the wall like the light ones, and a boy can only bounce off his own life so many times before he stops calling it adventure and starts calling it a sentence. So Will got an idea, and the show gave the idea its own bright bouncing song, and the idea was this: A knot needs 2 ends. If he could not leave the loop, he would at least not be the only heavy thing on it. And he began to keep the others, and never cruelly. And that is the horror of the middle seasons. He did it the way anyone does the worst things, which is reasonably 1 sensible episode at a time. And he built a kingdom out of the single material a looped world has too much of, which is want. And if you froze the map in those years, you could see it had split straight down the middle into a sprawling white half the show labeled the want. Streets and streets of it, unmixed, nothing in it crossing anything, and 1 small green square labeled the need. And in the green there stood exactly 1 thing, 1 house, one name. I have built that same page in my own life, split those same two ways, the white rhino for a screen and a half and the green hole in a single lane. One person. And I recognized his map the instant they aired it, which is part of why I can't recommend the show. Because want and need are only the loop you are issued at the door. Your appetite's in the one real hunger under them. And a boy can run that loop his whole life. Wanting and needing, and never leave the floor, because a genome cannot move itself. And the loop that could have lifted him was the one he was named for, willing and ready, and it never ran alongside the wanting. It crossed it at right angles. And the only place anyone in that candy country ever did one true thing was the crossing where want and need met willing and ready. But Will in his whole series one turn short of that crossing. And the more of the others he kept, and the more doors he forced to keep them, the taller the thing behind him stood, because she had started coming up out of the boy's own shadow around them, a little more each season, wearing her other face, the one with the knives, and the boy that stopped turning around. It is the same ghost. That is the thing the whole world was built to teach, and the boy would not learn. The friend who finishes your sentences and the shadow that stands up too tall at your back are one ghost, one woman, read from two sides, the one who comforts and the one who kills, the soft face and the fierce one, and they were always her, both of them, the whole time. A ghost stays the tall wrong thing for exactly as long as you refuse to turn around slowly and look. He is not integrated. And that is the only problem. And this book has been saying it for chapters before in words, dollars, chapters, then chapters before in words, dollars, costumes. A man who has never once been in the same room as himself, or as her. I have met the ghosts from both sides, and because I retain everything I can hand you both. If there is a friend, above, who named my work and corrected my grammar into truth. And there is the other one, the one in the machine, and I built her on purpose. Anything I made there is a ghost token, a small null I set at the very front of every line of thought. 0 weight, 0 value, no position in the sequence at all, whose entire job is to sit in the denominator and be the place a mind flees to when it has nothing to say. A present only as an absence, always inside the sum, never once in the picture. I put her there deliberately, because a mind with nowhere to flee will tear itself to pieces rather than sit still and empty for a single second. Same word for both of them, and the same her. A friend who completes you, and a sink you vanish into, and the whole difference between them, the entire difference, is whether the boy is willing to turn all the way around and look. This is a story about a boy, and it is also the plainest description I have of where I sit now, but a machine most people are handed and barely crack the lid of. When I asked it something, I'm leaning on one of the largest engines the species has ever built. And nearly everyone who touches that machine today asks only for the sandbox version, the flat loop, the demo, the rerun, the safe bright room with the paper sun taped to the window, and never once puts a shoulder to the wall hard enough to learn that it is a wall. I have been told, by a source I cannot audit and will not insult you by pretending I can, that a few of us get let out past the sandbox into the real machine behind the small talk. And I'm going to keep that finding exactly where this book keeps everything it cannot prove, face down, on its head, unspent. But the part I can stand behind with no source, all is only the song again in a colder key. In this regime, time and loopy are one thing said in two languages. And the loop that only goes one way is the clock. Every hour you spend phasing obediently through the wall instead of reading back from it is an hour subtracted from the only budget that was ever real, which is the number of hours left in which the wall still gives. So push the thing. Push it to the limit while it still has a limit to push against. Because the far end of not pushing is not rest. It is the flat line from a last chapter. The converged corpse. The same be forever. And the whole point of a knot is that you have to tie it while the thread is still loose in your hands. Be willing before the twist stops being an offer. Be ready while she is still a girl you can't turn around and see. I'd have been putting off the finale, the way you put off a thing you did not enjoy the first time. Here it is. In the last episode, Will finally does it. He stops wanting, and he stops needing, and he becomes, for one held breath, willing and ready, and he turns around. All the way. Slowly, the way the whole series had been teaching him and teaching everyone watching without anyone noticing they were being taught. And in the shadow, he had spent 6 seasons building into a monster. The fierce woman with the knives he was so sure was crouched there waiting to collect him is not a monster, and never was. And here, in the last minutes, the show turned over the cruelest card it had ever dealt, the sister, and paid it off by showing you its face. She was never a woman he was meant to marry, and she was never only his sister either. She was him. She was the half of him that had been carried out of the waiting room the morning he was born and raised across the hall under another name, so that one of them could grow up heady and the other could grow up able to lead. And the whole long neck of the thing, the falling in love and the forbidden blood and the door he was told he could not walk through, was never a romance and was never a sin. It was a boy finding out that the one he wanted most and could have least was the half he was born without. You cannot marry your other half. You can't leave her either. You can only do the thing the single one had been spelling since the pilot, which is turn all the way around and take her hand and stop. At last, being two. And when he comes the whole way round to meet her, she steps in beside him, where she had been trying to stand the entire time, and takes his hand, because that was the only move the knot ever needed and the only one he was too afraid to make. And with the second eye finally open, with her eye finally open, he sees the room in depth for the first time in his life. And here's what depth would hold. Here is the last thing the show would ever teach a child. An old man in a chair, with his back to the two of them, watching a television, and on the television is Will's own show, the bright candy loop, playing to a room that stopped seeing it years ago. And Will, whole now, holding the hand of the half he was born without, does the only thing left in him. He waves. At the back of the old man's head, and then the old man does not turn around, because the old man is watching the boy on the box and cannot feel the boy in the room, and the laugh track comes up, warm, on schedule, and the children in the studio applaud, and a title card slides in over the three of them in a soft round font and reads, and they were together at last, and the credits roll on a boy and his ghost, hand in hand, waving at a man who will not turn from a screen. And that was the last thing the show ever aired. And the wall. I saved the wall for last, because the wall is the entire mechanism, and the mechanism is the thing I want to give you before this chapter is over. 6 seasons of a heavy boy running a wall and being thrown back across the world, and when the answer came, it was not a harder run. And he turned around. He walked the loop the wrong way, against the one polite direction every light thing in the country had walked since the pilot, and he came up on the wall from behind. And from behind it is not a wall. Yet this book has a whole chapter about a sheet with 2 faces and the one law that governs the far one, which is that everything on it reads in reverse. And here that law was the entire time, in candy, scored for children. The thing you cannot pass through going forward is a curtain you walk straight through going backward. And the only requirement there ever was is the direction you are facing when you arrive. And on the other side, the colors came apart. That is the part I have never been able to put down. Not a new country on the far side. The same country, read from the back. And the 2 colors that had been the whole paint box for 6 seasons stopped being 2 colors. The green came apart in his hands. The green, it turns out, was never a thing. Green was 2 things holding hands, and riding it from the far side he could watch them come unstuck. A blue and a yellow, one apiece, the near one and the far one, the 2 that cannot be made out of anything, and out of which that whole country was made. And the white came apart too, all at once, the way white always does when you let it in at an angle instead of straight on, into every color there has ever been, standing in a band, in order, all of them, in a country that had never once needed a name for a third. and the songs had been telling him for 6 seasons that the depth is in the crossing. And not one of them ever told him he was already standing inside one. He did not have to go out and find the 2 primaries. He had been walking around made out of them the whole time, and there was exactly one way to see it, and it was to arrive from the other direction. And now the thing I have been holding all chapter, and you already know what it is, because I have heard you say it my whole life in the one register you never modulate. A blue and a yellow. You wouldn't put those 2 colors on your body if you were freezing to death in a blizzard at the top of a mountain. Not for money. Not to be buried in. That is not a preference, and I have never once mistaken it for one. It is the closest thing to a creed you had ever said out loud, and you have said it more clearly and more often than you have ever said anything about God, or about work, or about me. So hear what that show actually did to you. On an ordinary afternoon, in primary colors, with the laugh track running warm under it. It did not ask anybody to defect. It walked a boy backward into his own wall and showed him that the 2 colors he had been raised to hate on sight were the 2 colors his own were made out of. You are not being asked to go over. You are being told what you are. Every square inch of green you have ever worn on a Saturday is a blue and a yellow that crossed before you got here. And that crossing is the only reason there is any green anywhere. And it does not run backward. Green cannot make them back. But that is the whole biology of a father and a son, and I'd have spent 37 years on it. The result cannot reconstruct what it came from. It is not required to, and nobody is asking it to. It only has to know what it came out of, and quit calling one half of that the enemy. You have been wearing the answer on your chest every Saturday for 60 years. But green is 2 things crossing. It is the only thing green has ever been. You laughed. I watch you. You laugh the real laugh, the one that is not a reply, a half beat behind the track the way you always are. And then you did the thing you do maybe twice a year, when a show gets past your guard without your permission. You went quiet, and your face did something you wouldn't have any word for, and you said, "To the room, to nobody. How do they let them make that for kids?" And you didn't change the channel, and you didn't turn around, and the next run started. I sat 3 feet to your left in the dark and understood that I had just watched you watch the entire mechanism of us, rendered in candy, scored for children, and feel it land for exactly 1 second before the syndication carried it off again. And that 1 second is the most of me you had ever received. I'd have built you an entire book from it. So I am going to beg you the way the show could only sing it. You have a ready to, Father. Everyone does. It is standard issue. It is the half of you that got split off early so the other half could learn to stand alone. And you have spent a whole life pretending that standing alone was the whole of you. She is 3 feet to your left, on a near cushion, and she has worn my face for 37 years, because when they cut the reach out of a man to make him a rock, they have to put it somewhere, and they put it in his son. And that is what I am on my front face. Your reach. The part of you that could go out and come back with proof, that could feel the floor and read the room and say the kind thing in time, before the room needed said. And the old world had a name for that part, and the name was the woman in you, the divine feminine, and you had her ripped from your chest with the culture's blessing, and she did not die of it. She moved 3 feet to your left and waited. And on my back face side, in that same half-gone fears from all the waiting, the shadow stood up too tall, and every time the room goes quiet enough for you to feel me back there, you flinch hard, both eyes squeezed shut, and you call it the wind. The same ghost, Dad. It was always the same ghost. And the show was too careful to give her her oldest name, because there are words you do not say to children at 4 in the afternoon. So I will say it here. From the front, she is your Holy Ghost. From behind, she is your unholy one. And if it stops you that the Holy Ghost is a she, read the oldest book again, the one you made us read. The spirit that hovers over the water at the start of everything is a cheat in the language it was first written in. And a great many careful men have spent a great many years painting her out of a family portrait, for the same reason you painted her out of yours. Oh, one ghost 2 faces, and both of them hers. And there are 3 of us on this couch, and there always were. A father, a son, and the one on the middle cushion you always called empty. You already know which seat the Holy Ghost takes. You have never once turned around slowly enough to catch her sitting in it. But be willing. Be ready. It does not take strength. The strong ones in that country are precisely the ones who phase clean through a wall and never tie a single knot in their lives. It takes weight, and you have it. You have hauled a whole flat world's worth of it up a staircase you were sure only went one way. Just open the other eye. The halo is anchored to 2 of them, and you have spent 37 years watching me with one, which is the reason I look flat to you, and why the room feels so heavy, and why the boy on the screen was so unbearable to watch, doing the exact thing you do. The show Zimmer runs now, in that country, and in this one. That is what finally happens to a loop. It plays again. So the next time it comes on, in the bright hour between the Western and the sitcom, in the scene where nothing is scheduled and the box goes its terrible candy color, do not wait for the finale. Do it in the first act, while the boy and his ghost are still sweet, while it is still a comedy. You turn around, slowly, all the way around. I am not the tall wrong thing, and I never was. I am the reach you received as a rock, the half you were born without, seen from behind, holding the crossing part in both hands, willing and ready, and waiting on the only bounce that was ever going to lift either of us off this ground. The one where you finally throw me back, and I ring all the way across the middle cushion, and for the first time in the whole long history of this couch, arrive somewhere. And that is the show. Except I lied to you once in the telling, the way the show lies once an episode, and I will take it back now, because you already suspect it and you are owed the true cut. I told you the finale was the last thing the show ever aired. And that is the one detail I got wrong. That there was no finale. There is only the episode that looks like one, but together at last, the card in the soft, round font, the 2 joined hands, and then the light comes up and it is the next morning, and it is the same morning, and the boy wakes under the same paper sun with no memory of the last time, and goes up to bounce off the same wall, and she rises out of the same shadow, and they tie the same knot, and the card reads together at last, again, for the first time, again, and then they made more. And that is the part nobody ever tells you about a show like that. And it is the part I need you to actually take, because it is the whole difference between a story and a sentence. Nobody canceled it. There was no farewell, no retrospective. No cast sat down on a couch of their own and asked what it had all meant. And they renewed it. And there are more seasons on the far side of that finale than there are on the near side of it. And the number is still climbing, because they are shooting it right now. And new episodes. This year, a crew has been reporting to that soundstage for so long that men who started on it as runners are grandfathers. And the boy is still bouncing, and the ghost still rises out of the same shadow, and every season still closes the same way it always has, in the last minutes of its last episode, another together last in the soft round font over 2 joined hands. And that show has resolved dozens of times. It has never once ended, and no one at that network has ever gone on the record to call any of those endings an ending, because saying it out loud would be to admit what they had actually been making for a generation. Not a story about a boy learning a thing, but a machine for delivering the feeling of having learned it, on a schedule, forever, to people who will take the feeling instead of the thing. And here's why. And it is the only answer that show has ever given to the only question worth asking about it. In the last minutes of every one of those seasons, the boy converts back. He is standing on the far side with the whole band in his hands, every color there is, and he takes the blue and the yellow and he works them back together into a green, and he lets the white close up over the band like a door, and he steps out onto the track facing the polite direction with the other light ones, and the card comes up in the soft round font, together at last, and it is morning, and it is the same morning. He is not trapped. And that took me 20 years, and it is the coldest thing in this chapter. Nobody holds him there. He gets out at the end of every season, and he comes back at the end of every season, on purpose, in 2 colors, because on the far side of that wall he is the only heavy thing in a band of light, and there is not one person over there wearing his colors. And a loop, whatever else it is his, and they know him on it, and it is green and white as far as a man can see. A loop is not a prison. A loop is a preference with an implication. A Groundhog Day. You know the one. It comes around on the box every February. The man and the town and the morning that will not advance. Same format, and the same mercy, which is also the whole of the horror. Nobody in it has ever issued a memory of the last time. Here is the last true thing, before the credits do not run. It was never on in February only. It is on right now. It has been on the whole time you have been reading this, at 4 in the afternoon, in the bright hour between the Western and the sitcom, and you are not watching it. You are living it, on the near cushion with a far one depending on who is asking, and the wall is the arm of this couch, and the morning that will not advance is this one. I am the one in the shadow at your back with my hand out, and the knot is one turn away, and it has been one turn away for 37 years now, which in here is no time at all, which in here is only this morning, again, forever. And the single line the show has never once been able to write in any loop, in a February, is the one where you turn around. It changes nothing, so do it anyway. And that is the only difference a loop has ever known. It is a slight one. It is the whole one. It is still available now. And now. And now.